There's this phrase from the psychoanalyst Bion Wilford Bion, who is one of my favorites, my favorite therapists, and also quite a mystic, really, in his own right. He spoke about going to pieces without falling apart, which I think is a really rich, evocative image, one that conveys a lot of the truth of this path. That way that we can all be ground into dust at times, not in a disempowering way, but in a way that's full of life and overflowing with the potential of the pregnant unknown. It's like that cup has to be emptied, where, yes, our heart is raw, we're stripped bare, we find ourselves naked on the ground at the feet of the great mystery. And just the sacredness in that, and this feeling, this knowing that there's something happening here that's beyond what I know, beyond what I think, and beyond what I've learned, and beyond what I've come to believe. It's not quite what I thought it was. This heart, this life, the love that keeps the stars and the planets from sort of crashing into one another and falling out of the sky. There's something that is holding it all together, despite my going to pieces at times. And I think one of the paradoxical discoveries, with all this is that there's something in this atmosphere of experience, some wisdom, some polishing of the heart here in the blue areas that's just not accessible when everything is up and flowing and positive and clear. And what can so often happen is that if we turn from this prematurely, it's just too raw, too naked, too open, too groundless in a way. And we split off from, or we dissociate from, or otherwise abandon the figures and the images and the feelings that are here that make up this place, this blue place. All of that disowned, orphaned, marginalized soul material, all of that just ends up in what we call the shadow. The psychological shadow being the place. And of course, it's not really a place, but it's an underground, underworld storage area where parts of ourselves, where aspects of our perception and personalities, where pieces of our souls are sequestered if we're unwilling or unable to be in a conscious, embodied, and kind relationship with them. And from there, of course, they call out, they long to reach us, to find us, to find a way back home, and to come into the light of awareness, not as an enemy to take us down, and it can feel that way at times, or to get in the way of our awakening and healing. But they come as allies of wholeness, as one of the emissaries of integration and that felt experience of non-dividedness. And there's a whole area of inner work, of course, which is often completely neglected, or else often really misunderstood in my experience, that we call shadow work or shadow integration, that points to the retrieval of these pieces of soul, the re-owning of that which I had to split off or dissociate from earlier in my life, you know, to reassociate with that which has become dissociated. to re-embody that which had to be disembodied in order to adapt, to fit in, to survive, to stay safe. And of course, this repression, into underworld, into shadow, was not some sign, is not some sign of some raging neurosis or of how unevolved or how unspiritual we are. But it was intelligent and creative to do so, as an early form of self-care and self-compassion in order to prevent overwhelm, and to keep us out of a certain sort of survival level, panic, anxiety, terror. And I think one of the things that I've discovered, certainly in my own life, and also in my clinical work, really, and it was something I actually wasn't aware of early on, certainly not something I was ever taught in my training, and that's training from my meditation teachers, nor training in psychotherapy. But what I started to see was that when we turn from these parts of ourselves, thereby abandoning all of those energies, feelings, and images, there's a way that that can result, and often does result, in what we might call a certain sort of soul loss. And in that, we can find ourselves tired, exhausted, depleted, and unable to find any real meaning in our lives. It's a shutdown of the creative function and our capacity to play, to imagine. And I think in this war is what can feel like on an inner level. We can end up in a relationship with life that is divided and partial. And I don't think any of us here on a call like this really want to live a partial life. It's like we need the blue ones and the representatives of the shadow, which are only pieces of light in disguise. We need them to feel creative, to feel alive, to feel intimate, for there to be real movement in psyche, for things not to get too sure or too certain or too fixed or too solid or too stagnant. We need the energies, the figures, the feelings, the images of not knowing. We need that empty cup. Not to fuse with them or drown in them, but to be in dialogue and relationship with them. And so that we can mine that alchemical gold, that essence, that emerald, that silver, those qualities that are contained within those experiences. I mean, it takes so much life energy, so much libido, so much chi, so much prana, so much of our sacred life force to keep certain experiences out of our conscious awareness, to keep parts of ourselves in the shadow, which in my experience can really greatly contribute to the deep tiredness and lack of inspiration that so many of us feel, at least at certain times. And by cutting ourselves off from the full spectrum of experience, including the blue regions, the atmosphere of the blue, there's a way that we can lose touch with our own natural creativity, spontaneity, and that innate human capacity to play in reality, to vision, to dream a new dream, to tell a new story, to weave new cloth. And I think recovering that capacity to play, to be in those more unstructured states of consciousness, wonder, awe, not knowing, and that simple, agendaless joy of just being, which is causeless. And this joy is a joy that's causeless. It's wired into this place, into this heart. It's not produced by having a certain experience. It's a quality of a way of experiencing itself, which so many of us have been disconnected from. And it's not too difficult to see why. But I think recovering that capacity is certainly one of the reasons why I do the work that I do, and therapy and these courses and retreats and so forth, but is really one of the goals of this path, the way, at least the way I see it. Certainly one of the goals of therapy, you know. And there's which we learn a lot from by Winnicott, who of course considered the capacity of client and therapist to play together in reality to sort of be the highest expression of therapy. And of course we have to unpack what that means, and I do find that there is a profound connection between that felt aliveness, that energetic flow, and this blue area, the alchemical blue, the bluing of the soul. There's a way that those are linked. It's not possible to play, to dream, to imagine, to vision, to fully participate here in what's really happening behind the scenes, behind the veil, if we're not in some sort of conscious, direct, naked, embodied, compassionate relationship with those types of experiences that we've all learned to turn away from.